In this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, I have my guy, Leif Thulin, the guy that watches more college basketball than anyone else, and we are going to discuss Feast Week. We're going to talk about the prospects that could possibly help their draft stock this week, and also some of the big matchups that either have played or have been played or will be played this week. Stay tuned to hear Leif's thoughts on Feast Week 2023. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. So visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. Big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Rafael Barlowe, the director of scouting for NBA Big Board. And my co-host, like I mentioned, Leif Thulin, the guy that watches more college basketball than anyone else. So I know this is a huge, huge week for you because there's games all day long. Like, are you able to rest? I mean, well, let me ask you this. Is it better that the games are spread out from the daytime to the evening? Or do you like it when they're all condensed in like a 4 or 5 hour time frame?
Oh, all day hoops is great for me. So that's wonderful. It's really just when I have time to fully watch it with all my attention right now, because I'm working a lot, different jobs. But today I mostly was able to consume 3 of the 4 games, and the fourth one I'll be watching part of live, and then the rest that I miss on Synergy. So for instance, Maui starting today, and I'll catch a few other games as well. I'm definitely in my happy stages, especially with a little lighter workload this week. I'm going to watch a lot of basketball, and I couldn't be happier about it.
Yeah, I've just been so busy that I totally forgot the game started, and I looked up and I was like, oh man, there's a game today. It was like Tennessee played, was it Syracuse? And
Yep.
The game started pretty early. So I'm glad that college basketball is here. We have draft stuff to actually talk about, real games, not based off of like old high school film and what a guy did last year. But let's go to the game or the matchup that you are most looking forward to seeing this week.
Yeah, I think it comes tomorrow, or I guess when you guys listen to this today, Tennessee and Purdue. And this is mostly from a college basketball fan standpoint, but I think there are guys that have cases to make the NBA. I picked in a preview on Locked On College Basketball with Isaac Shade in July, Tennessee to win this tournament, when they were the lowest ranked team of the ones that are the top 4 in this. Whereas, Chaminade obviously not up there. Syracuse not quite in the same echelon, but the other 6 teams are really well regarded. So I'm curious to see how good that team can be. And I'm curious to see from the NBA draft perspective, is Dalton Knecht, someone who transferred from Northern Colorado to Tennessee, someone who will make significant splashes on draft boards. I think that he will be a popular name for people who aren't diehard college basketball fans but love the draft. I think in the coming weeks they're going to say, "Oh my gosh, who's this guy in the SEC? Who's one of the top scorers in the SEC? He's got good size, like a solid athlete, unspectacular but solid athlete."
I don't know, man. He had a nice dunk.
He had a great dunk. But the one thing that people are going to hold ball against him is he's older. But he can shoot, he can move, he's big. He can play with the ball, play without the ball. I think he's someone who will make a name for himself. And speaking of someone older, Josiah Jordan-James is always someone that defensively has the ability to play NBA defense. It's just how well can he shoot the ball, and what type of teams would want a player at his age who's shown how much he has on film, because he's been a stalwart on this team for years.
I remember, like, I can remember exactly where I was at when I started watching film on certain prospects. I remember exactly where I was at when I watched Josiah Jordan-James film from when he was in high school. I was in China. It was 2019. And I remember, like, it was that class with Nico Mannion. I mean, it just seems like it was so long ago. Nico Mannion's been a pro for at least 3 years. I mean, I watched him play, I feel like 2 seasons ago in Italy.
Fun fact, I played against Nico Mannion many times growing up.
Did you give him buckets? Did your floater work against him?
I mean, my team actually won the last time we played Nico Mannion's team before he
Really?
moved to Arizona. That said, he cooked us many, many
Okay.
times. One of the
Okay.
best ankle-breaking crossovers I've ever seen in my life was
But
performed by Nico Mannion on a guy at the top of the zone with me. I'm so glad I wasn't on that side of the court.
it wasn't you. It wasn't
It
you.
wasn't me, but I wasn't going to do any better.
Yeah, Nico's I think he's playing for Baskonia this year. Very interesting path, for a guy to go from one and done, and he just made a career for himself in Europe. So but anyway, but yeah, Josiah Jordan James has been around, but Dalton Knecht has been fun to watch. He is a scorer. Me and my brother did a podcast where we talked about him, and he is a guy that he's just a scorer. He knows how to get to a spots. I love the fact that he has like a pull-up jumper. He shoots over the top of smaller guards. He's active. He moves without the ball. And I know people are going to hold his age against him because he'll be 23 on draft day. But he is a player that I still think has upside, especially if you hear a story. He was a guy that was like 5'1", and then all of a sudden he had a growth spurt, and then he had a growth spurt while he was in junior college. So I think he still has some upside. But even if he is closer to his prime than, let's say, a 19-year-old or so, I think that he can bring value to an NBA team. Like most of the guys I feel like in this draft class cannot help a team right away. They're so young. I mean, you hear it all the time how this is not a strong class. So if it's not a strong class and it's a bunch of really young guys, how many of those guys can help a team that is looking to find some production right away in the draft? And I think Dalton Knecht could be one of those guys. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with that. I think the question for him is going to be, is he a good enough shooter to be a 3-and-D at the NBA? Because he plays a fairly solid amount of time on the ball at Tennessee. Like they have guards, they pass it to him, and he creates for himself. That's obviously not the role. Shooting the ball, he's got a very nice stroke. Like his free throw percentage will be really good. His shooting hasn't quite come around. He had a decent day today, but I think he's going to be an all SEC guy, and that's going to be arguably the best league in basketball. And I think he's on the best team in the SEC and arguably in college basketball. And I think all those things will help his stock in what we've perceived to be a weak draft. And I think this will be a class that is laden with upperclassmen being picked higher than you typically would see, just because of the lack of respect for the younger players. In terms of what you just mentioned, how can they help a team in their first year or two? I think more teams are going to think, well, let's take someone who's a more surefire thing than, get fired for taking a swing.
That's an episode we may need to touch on. Will this be a draft that will see upperclassmen selected in the first round? Now, the thing about Knecht is he shot 38% from three at Northern Colorado last year on 6 attempts per game. So I think the shot is going to come along, but I think he's a good enough shooter that in a reduced role in the NBA where he's a spot-up shooter and not really shooting threes off the dribble, I think that he can be fine with that role. But I think he is a top 60 guy as of today.
I wouldn't be surprised if he goes in the first round.
You think so? Yeah, I mean, I can see that. Let's say if it's a team like Milwaukee or Denver, or a team that feels like they're close, and maybe one of those teams drafted a project last year or the year before, but they're looking for someone that can come in. Maybe even a team like Miami. He might be like one of those Miami guys that I wouldn't say he comes out of nowhere if he's a first round pick, but he seems like he could be a Heat culture guy because they just really don't care about your resume or your background. I mean, what's the guy's name? Highsmith?
Yeah, Haywood Highsmith.
I mean, you have to be a die hard basketball fan to know Haywood Highsmith, where he went to school. All right, is there any other games that you are looking forward to seeing? Actually, before you get into that, Zach Edey, do you think Zach Edey can change the perception or maybe help his draft stock this week?
Yes, I think the big question will be in that game against Tennessee. I think Tennessee is uniquely equipped with the size. That said, one of their big sprained his ankle today, Tobe Awaka. So that may actually hurt their chances to win this. But Zach Edey, we know he can score. We know on the post he can go into the middle and shoot a right-hand jump hook. We know that he's going to influence shots around the rim with his towering stature. Can he slide a little bit? Like, I'm not saying he needs to switch screens, but he's shown that he's been sliding a little bit and influencing shots. Like against Arkansas, I watched their scrimmage and they switched him at the end of the game. Yes, L. Ellis missed a layup he probably should have made, but Zach Edey was moving pretty well. So maybe the movement and the ability to run up and down the floor in terms of his conditioning could be things to watch for. And I don't expect to see him shoot threes or something. Like some people have said, like, will Zach Edey shoot threes? No, like why would you put him out there when he's a monster in the paint and every time he touches the ball he commands a ton of attention? Like their goal is to win. It's not just to develop Zach Edey. So there's nothing particular. I'm like, oh, Zach Edey, this is what I got to see. But I think he'll have a game where if he's able to dominate against a big team in Tennessee and he influences some shots that he slides on rather than just being there, I think that's a positive.
Yeah, I mean, he's bailing the defense out if he's shooting threes. If I'm an opposing coach, I'm like, please, Zach Edey, try to improve your draft stock and go ahead and launch these threes because I would much rather have him out there than on the inside. All right, when we return, I'm going to pick Leif's brain about some of the other matchups this week and a few prospects that he believes could improve their draft stock. But first, let's talk about FanDuel, because you can score this NFL season with FanDuel, which is America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, if you are a new customer, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That is $150 if your team wins. And if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, overs, unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL and Locked On. All right, before we get into the second segment, I wanted to let you know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the great local experts of Locked On and also the national shows that are covering every league. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Big shout out to David Locke and the staff at Locked On for making this happen. That is a big deal, a huge deal. All right, back to Feast Week previews. What's another game that you are looking forward to seeing, or a matchup that you have highlighted on your calendar? Because like I said, I know it's stuffed with college basketball, and I imagine you're going to be stuffed this week with turkey and college basketball.
That would be an ideal weekend, no doubt about it. I'm curious to see how Oso Ighodaro does with the Dembona. I think that's like just a positional matchup, both from a college basketball fan front and then the NBA draft, of course. And then the other thing to mention about UCLA is Berke Buchtenschel is playing.
Ooh, we got the pronunciation. You know, I used to live in Turkey, so
I got it. I know how to pronounce the foreign players' names.
I need your help because I struggle, especially the French ones.
Oh, I can help you with that. I took French.
So are you one of the few like Americans that took a foreign language to actually like learn it? Because I know when I took foreign language in school, I just cared about passing and I didn't retain any of it. And I've lived in multiple countries and I still don't speak the language.
I took French and Spanish to the AP level in high school. So Spanish I can speak a little bit of. French I would say I can understand. I don't think I can really conjugate any verbs anymore.
Crazy. I just came from Madrid and Paris in the last month and didn't learn a single thing. But in the basketball world, everybody speaks English, so you don't really have to speak another language. And the Marquette UCLA game is actually being played right now while we're recording. So if you're listening and something great happens and we don't cover it, it's because we are recording during the game. But that's a matchup that I definitely am looking forward to seeing myself. I'm really curious to see UCLA's international players, because I think if they have a successful run, I think it's going to change international recruiting forever. Because a lot of the top international players, like the top ones, don't necessarily come over to the States. You get some good ones from here and there, but for the most part, guys that are projected like first round picks usually stay where they're at. And I think what makes this situation a little bit different is that UCLA has a few guys from Spain. If they're not from Spain, they may have played in Spain, so their rights are owned by Spanish teams. And the ACB is the toughest domestic league in the world. I mean, I think it's even tougher than the G League. The style of play is totally different. And so it's very hard for young guys to get significant minutes playing in the ACB. So you look at a guy like Baba Miller, who's in Real Madrid system. You got Jan Vide, who's also in Real Madrid system. You have Edey Mara. I think he played for, I know it's spelled like Zaragoza, but I know it's pronounced like totally different. How's it pronounced? Do you know?
It depends the dialect, but I bet it's Zaragoza. But yeah. I don't know that for certain.
I think so, because I was just there and someone said, I was like, what? So you got him. I'm missing somebody else, and then you had Berk from Turkey. So I think if they play and have significant roles, then I think you're going to see more of the top international guys going. If they don't play and they're not playing a lot, and then you look at a guy like Nikola Topic, who stayed in Europe and stayed in Serbia, and he ends up going pretty high. And if Zachary Reese's share goes high and Alex Starr stays high, then I think the international prospects, at least the top ones, would be like, it may be better off for us to stay. Then you can even look at Ethan Almanza's situation, the way he's playing right now. So I think this is going to be a huge year for like down the line and how international prospects will view college basketball and even coming over to the States prior to the draft. So I'm looking forward to seeing, like I said, UCLA's guys. I mean, that team, it seems like that team is full of international guys. I mean, Adem Bona is from, he's Nigerian, by the way, of Turkey. Then you got, Berk, I can't pronounce the last name, but he's from Turkey. Amara's from Spain. They have a French point guard. Vide is Slovenian.
Stefanovic is Serbian.
Yeah, it's a lot of guys on that team. What are your thoughts on UCLA overall as a team?
I think they'll be good from a college basketball standpoint. Mick Cronin took Cincinnati, and that's not a very highly regarded recruiting situation. They have a storied basketball history, but recruiting wise, you don't get that many recruits to Cincinnati. He made them very successful after Bob Huggins, and I have no doubt at UCLA when you can get good talent. He didn't take them from LA area. He took them from international places, so I think it's an interesting move. But I have no doubt that this team will if they buy in, will be talented enough to go far in a tournament. I just think it's interesting because it's super young after having such a veteran bunch. But in this matchup, I'm really curious to see if Adem Bona's physicality overwhelms Oso Ighodaro's kind of skill and finesse. And I don't think you're going to see too much of Edey Mara in this matchup. I think he's a little too raw, and Ighodaro is so skilled that in a matchup where Cronin wants to win, I think you're going to see Bona play the 5 more frequently.
And how does that impact Mara's draft stock, in your opinion? If he is not able to play college basketball, how does that impact him in the NBA when his game could be more suited for college basketball?
I'll preface this with the fact that Marquette plays small and they play fast. So I think that it's hard to play too big. So I don't know if that's necessarily a shot at Mara. I just think it's hard when he was just cleared, so he wasn't able to practice too much. And it's difficult to play two bigs against a team that plays as fast and spread out as Marquette does. So I'll reserve judgment until I watch Mara play more in person. And I'll see him in person in Utah. And then, of course, I'll be watching many games, but I just don't see him having that big of an impact. I'm more curious about Bona and Ighodaro in this matchup.
Yeah, that is a matchup I'm definitely going to tune into once we finish recording this podcast. All right, when we return, I want to ask you about UConn and their game today. And Donovan Clingan only had 2 rebounds. Are you a little bit concerned with his play so far? He only had 7 points today. Only played 12 minutes. But are you a little bit concerned about his play? And then I want to talk about Dillon Mitchell, who had 21 points. The fact that he took 12 shots is amazing to me. All right, we'll talk about those guys when we return. But let's talk about PrizePicks, because PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy, and it is the easiest and the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It is just you against the numbers instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks. All you do is pick 2 to 6 players and their stat projections. It's just you against the numbers, and you can watch the winnings roll in. And with basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from a specials league. It is the league that was created specifically for combo projections that includes 2 or more different sports or leagues. For example, LeBron James plus Travis Kelce at a 10.5 combination of 3-pointers made and receptions. And PrizePicks offers a reboot policy so that your entries can stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. I'm a Blazers fan, and the Blazers' entire roster is injured, so that would be very good for PrizePicks. And so for football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. And PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Once again, prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. And if you use the code, you can get a first deposit match up to $100. All right, when we left off, I talked a little bit about Dillon Mitchell and the fact that I'm surprised he took 12 shots. What have you seen out of Dillon Mitchell so far as a sophomore that has been encouraging for you?
I think Dillon Mitchell could have and probably would have still been picked in the first round last year after the combine. Mm-hmm. And not because of his film at Texas, but just you saw the perfect archetype have success the year before in Peyton Watson, someone who had a very minimal impact on UCLA the year prior, despite being a highly regarded recruit. Goes 30th, he plays well. Dillon Mitchell's bigger, he's probably a better athlete, a little different role. And then he shot 0 threes, and then the very first play of the combine, and we were there, splashed a 3. And then he shot a number of other ones that I don't think we were quite in rhythm, and he didn't make them, but it was a confidence builder. And you saw the other things he did well. He slides, he rebounds, he runs, he deflects balls, and he was playing out of position at Texas. Like, people in the NBA circles know he's not a 3 and D. Like, he's not going to be shooting. He's going to be playing the 4 more frequently, and he'll likely
at 200 pounds or however much he weighed. That's why I think it was hard to.
I think he's a 4. I don't think he's a 3.
I mean, last year he played like, sorry to cut you off. Last year, if you just watched his skill set, he looked like a 5.
Well, that's what I was about to say. I was going to say that I think you could even make an argument that you could have drafted him to be like a utility 4 who can play the 5 in a small ball lineup. You have big wings, and just because of his unique athleticism. That said, I think he's improved his stock. I think his confidence has skyrocketed. Last year, they had to cater to the likes of Marcus Carr, Serge Ibaka Rice, some guys that were older, and now it's not necessarily his team, but there's more of an approach that suits building confidence for him. And there's also a lack of Dylan DeSue, who also plays the 4 at Texas, and so that's given him more opportunity. So to answer this question is, I haven't seen enough of his individual skill set improving, but the confidence improving with that level of unbelievable athleticism. I'm bullish on what Dillon Mitchell can be.
You know, his situation is really interesting. We're talking about a guy that was highly touted coming out of, was he at Mount Verde? I know he was on one of those loaded teams.
Think so.
And there were some people that thought he was a first round pick, lottery pick. I remember talking to somebody at this time last year, and they were like, he's a lottery pick. And actually, I was going to say, I'll say it. Tony Jones is one of the guys that was really high
I
on
know.
on Dillon Mitchell, and I wasn't. And then he had a combine where I thought he played well, especially that first day. I honestly felt like if he would have said like, I got a hamstring tightness, I can't come back on day 2, shut it down after that, I think he would have been drafted.
I agree.
So he has a second day at the combine, and it's like he was trying to be aggressive, and the shot wasn't falling. Comes back to school and has less fanfare and less buzz, less draft buzz coming into his sophomore year in a weaker class, because he had quite a significant amount of draft buzz in a strong class last year. Comes back, it's a weaker class, and he just doesn't have a lot of draft buzz. What is your thought on that?
Honestly, I thought he was going to leave after that day, and then I interviewed him after the second day. And he just had this outlook that was really impressive, where he kind of talked about, oh, I wasn't, asked to shoot, but I wanted to help the team win. And I know these are like words that a lot of people would say. But then I asked him about what his mindset was for the combine. He's like, I wanted to show that I can do these things, but all the stuff you already see me do on film, I'm going to do it against these better athletes. And then he's showing that that's exactly the case. He's going to go back to school. He's going to be more confident. He's going to shoot more and better. And he's going to do all the same intangible things that people actually want of him. Like the question, everything that anyone talks about is Dillon Mitchell shot. That's not what he's getting drafted for. He's getting drafted for his athleticism. So why not fine tune the shot and then just get better at what you're really good at? And there's a place in the league for his athleticism, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I know, like, when you interviewed him, because I spoke to him briefly. It wasn't necessarily an interview, but he's an impressive kid.
Yeah.
Like, he's very impressive. That's why another reason why I was shocked that he didn't return to school, because he's a guy that I think would have helped his draft stock in just the interview process. I mean, he's a bright kid. He's well-spoken. He just gives you this. I mean, you just feel good. If you're a team, you feel good about drafting him on your team. You feel good about just him overall, and especially if you believe in your developmental program that you can fix the shot or just kind of develop what he has naturally. But it's interesting. We'll see if he's able to get his draft stock back to what it was at this time a year ago. All right. Is there any other matchups or games that you're looking forward to seeing that involve some prospects that could possibly help their draft stock?
One who has improved his draft stock is Kevin McCullar. I'm not sure there's like an individual matchup for him. I assume they'll play Marquette or UCLA, who winner that. And Kansas is going through Dickinson. He's balling on the interior, but Kansas doesn't really have shooting. So if Kevin McCullar can establish himself as a shooter, he's had back-to-back triple doubles after never having any before that. So he's someone that I would watch out for. And this is not a matchup necessarily, especially of midweek tournaments, but a name to watch out for is a skill set that I'm intrigued by that reminds me a little bit of Dillon Mitchell is Ryan Dunn. And this is someone I talked to you about at the end of last year that I thought would be someone who could crack the first round. But his defensive numbers are staggering right now. And so they just played Wisconsin, and Virginia did poorly, and the team's poor offensively. But Ryan Dunn is a 6'8" wing who has, and I'll just read you his first 4 games right here. 1 steal, 2 blocks in the first one, 7 steals, 0 blocks the second game, 2 steal, and he also guarded Riley Kugel for a fair amount of that. 2 steals, 3 blocks his third game, 3 steals, 4 blocks, and then he had 5 blocks in the first half today against Wisconsin. I don't know his exact stats after the game. I only was able to watch the first half, but his activity is unbelievable. It's like Dillon Mitchell, though. He just needs to work on a shot.
But he was a good shooter in high school, if I remember correctly. And I think he shot the ball well last year. It was a very limited amount of attempts. So I feel like there was some promise.
He didn't shoot enough to warrant anything, I don't think, there.
Yeah, today he had against
5 blocks and 2 steals.
3 of 6 shooting, 6 rebounds. Yeah, he's become like the media darling or draft, one of the draft Twitter darlings. And last year he shot 31% from 3, Wasn't great. Only 50% from the foul. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, only 50% from the foul line. So I was
We
wrong
were
about
on
that.
him early though. We had a
No.
conversation.
You were on him early. I can't take any credit for that because you were on him early. I was not on him early.
Well, I'll take that, I guess. I was
Yeah.
being inclusive.
Nah, you get all the credit for that one. Kevin McCullar. Ah, man. I like Kev. And actually it just seemed like he's been in school for a while. Was it last summer or summer 2022 when he first was entering the draft? I was actually there. I guess I can tell it now. I was actually there with him in I forgot the name of the city, some small town in New Jersey on the Jersey Shore. I watched his workouts, and I was actually there when he put his name in the portal. And yeah, because he was trying to decide between whether or not he's going to stay in the draft or put his name in the portal. And he put his name in the draft, but in the portal at the same time. Goes to Kansas, has a good year last year. I thought he would have been a second round pick and if he stayed in last year's draft. I mean, the concerns were, the same about the shooting. I didn't know if coming back to school again was going to help his draft stock. So, like you said, he's played well. He's had back-to-back triple doubles, and I think teams know he can defend. At the end of his, I don't know, was it his? I get guys' years mixed up because I don't know if a guy's a senior or a super senior or a 6-year senior. So at the end of his last year at Texas Tech, he played some point guard. He was able to initiate the offense. So I thought he showed some passing there. He's shown it this year, like you said, with the back-to-back triple doubles. The first game of the year, he made 4 of 7 from 3. And it was like, hey, if Kevin McCullar, with everything that he does, if he can knock down threes, he's going to really make himself some money. Well, since then, I think he's like 2 for 13 from 3. In your opinion, because I think he'll be 24 around draft time, and he has it's interesting because he may have a more defined skill set. I guess it's debatable than Dalton Knecht. But I think you may feel like Knecht has more upside because his story is a little bit a bit different. But do you think if Kevin McCullar shoots 31% from 3 again this year, do you think that will be good enough to get him drafted in what is considered a weak draft, in a draft where teams may look for veteran help?
I do think he will get drafted within the top 60. I don't think he goes in the first round. 31% in college, especially with the looks that he'll be getting, with the doubles that Dickinson gets. I am dubious would move the needle for scouts just because that's a dare shooter in the NBA if he shoots 31%. So imagine taking 2 feet back on the lines. And McCullar shot really poorly at the combine. I know tiny sample size, but they've talked about on the broadcast ad nauseum. It's like, oh, Kevin McCullar's retooled his jump shot. Well, if he shoots 31% with a retooled jump shot, I just don't think he's going to be able to shoot at an NBA 3D. I think he's Torrey Craig. I've made this comparison for 2 or 3 years now. I really liked him guarding Banchero. In fact, one of my best friends is a Duke fan, and I told him I would put Kevin McCullar on Banchero rather than all those long, rangy defenders. I wanted McCullar because I thought he's the best defender. But Torrey Craig is only barely an NBA guy right now because his athleticism wanes a little bit as he ages, and he can't shoot. But he's a really impactful guy that people know about because of what he did playing alongside Jokic, who gives him great looks for years past. And obviously I know he's not there anymore, but that's where his name was made.
I mean, honestly, if Kevin McCullar has a Torrey Craig career, that's a win. Torrey Craig is, I don't know what year it is for him. Is it 5, 6? I mean, there are guys that you can say are more naturally talented that had bigger names that haven't lasted as long as Torrey Craig. I mean, let's just use Josh Jackson for an example, right? So I think that's a win. And I know people don't really like comparing guys to stars or high level rotation players. But Torrey Craig is 32 years old. He's 32 years old. His first NBA experience was in 2017, and he's been in the NBA since. That's a pretty good career, especially for a guy that started off in Australia. I want to say spent maybe was it like the first 3 years in Australia, went undrafted. I mean, what is it like? South Carolina upstate or something like that.
USC upstate.
So, but he made a name for himself. I mean, as a great defender in Australia. Yeah, I mean, he's made good money. So I mean, I'm sure Kevin wouldn't want to take the Australian route to the NBA, but I mean, Torrey Craig is, what is it, 7 years now?
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean that as a slight. Like, I just think that's the role. Like, you got to be realistic. If McCullar's in his 5th year, he'll be 23 and some change by draft night, and his skill set is very much defensively oriented, a heady player offensively who can swing the ball and cut. Why not try to emulate someone like Torrey Craig and then get yourself picked 30 to 40? Like, I think he can be an early 2nd round pick if he continues to shoot better. But I just looked it up. Torrey Craig's shooting 32% in the NBA right now from 3. I don't know if McCullar
39% last year on 3 attempts per game.
Yeah, and I will say he played with the Suns, who got him great looks.
Yeah,
but I mean, that's the same thing. You can't knock what happened there. I think McCullar will have to shoot better than 31% to get himself in consideration for a first round, but I do think he's draftable even without much improvement, if any, just based off these first 4 games of the season where he's swinging the ball around. And I think he's going to be asked to do uncomfortable things for Kansas because they lack shooters and they lack scorers. And so he's going to be into more facilitating roles as a supplementary facilitator. And I'm curious to see how he does when they get into Big 12 play with that.
Yeah, same here, especially when they have DeJuan Harris and then you got Elmarko Jackson. I mean, you can say they got 3 of the best ball handlers as far as I just Kansas's team is really, really good. Not a team that's going to wow you with like NBA talent. I mean, I think Elmarko is probably their best long-term NBA prospect, but he's not their best college player by any means. Well, that wraps up this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast. Once again, thank you, the listener, for making the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast your first listen of the day. And if you are an everydayer, be sure to stay tuned this week because we're not taking any days off. We have podcasts coming every day for the remainder of the week. And once again, you have to check out Locked On Sports Today 24/7. 24/7, 7 days a week, covering the top sports stories in the world. Once again, it's Rafael Barlowe with Leif Thulin, and we are out.